I didn't know we were going to be in a theatre when I came up with this slide. I feel a relatively big newcomer to your world. Many of you have worked in this all your lives. I'm a public health nutritionist, and I think I've specialised in outrage across the entire lifespan. Before I set up First Steps, I spent many years trying to bring in standards for school food for older people with dementia, for food for looked after children, for food for people with learning disabilities, endlessly outraged that we just don't support people well around eating well in our community. I hadn't really gone into infancy until about 7 years ago, and I always say it's a bit like you go into a new world and you stick your head through the curtains and you think, hang on a minute, it's not all okay in here. And I was really pretty shocked to discover that the only source of information about infant formula came from the companies. And I phoned lots of people I knew and I said, this can't be right. It's written into the EU regulations that every member state will provide independent information to its health professionals. So I contacted Department of Health and they said, yeah, but nobody does it. It would upset the companies potentially. It's too difficult. It's too hard. So sort of, if I'd known now what I knew then, I wouldn't have started it. We thought we should get it together. So I set up a charity, First Steps Nutrition Trust. We're going to be 5 next year. And it sort of started off as trying to fill those little gaps in the jigsaw puzzle where we could help out with all the other brilliant work that's going on. So our job isn't to try and cross over with all the work that other people do, but to try and fill the odd gap that we can so that you can have, as health professionals, independent information. All our stuff is policy-based and expert and open access, and I think those things are really essential. Just as Christy Jo said, we shouldn't have to pay for good information. You can use any of our information in any of your work in public health. Copy it, photocopy it, as long as you don't make money out of it. Although actually, do you know what? I don't even mind about that. I think good information should be used. We are, of course, totally conflict of interest free. Working conflict of interest free is getting increasingly tricky for all sorts of people, particularly academics in the UK. And we really do need to constantly talk about the importance of being conflict of interest free. We also try and work across not just the UK. I also work to try and support better regulation within the EU and internationally. And we have another section of work that we do that's very much around promotion of sustainability and sustainable diets, which is my work with the Centre for Food Policy, and supporting low-income families through our work with the Healthy Start Alliance. So if you want to find out any more about the other things we do, you can go to our website. But I've only got half an hour. So I'm going to mostly focus on one little story, which I hope will entertain you. Most people know that we produce this infant milk report. What we do is we gather all the information from the companies, and what we like to think of it as being is holding a mirror up. So we're saying, this is what it is. This is what they're telling us. This is how it relates to the evidence and the policy. What do you think? It's actually much harder to get the information than you might imagine. The companies tell you they're going to give you every bit of information you need, but it takes a lot of phone calls to sometimes get it. We have to update it regularly. The components of infant milk are bought on the international market, so depending on which bit is cheaper, the formulas will change composition quite regularly. And as they are constantly trying to find some new marketing approach, they will add and take away different ingredients over time. But remember, the claims they make are only on the ingredients that don't have to be there by law. If they have to be there by law, you can't make a claim about them. So when you see that it says it's going to protect your baby in some way, in some kind of advertising, that'll be from an added ingredient, and it's really important to remember that. We also do a couple of simple guides. I actually did the breast milk and breastfeeding guide, which is a real signposting guide to all the great work that everybody else does, because I kept getting abusive emails from people saying, I can't believe that you promote formula. And I thought we'd made it quite clear that we were all about protecting breastfeeding through good information. But I thought maybe it's good to have something that just really spells it out. And going back very much to what Christy Jo just said, I am not anti-formula. We absolutely need a safe alternative for infants. But what we want is something that is safe, we know everything we can find out about, and that is at a valued price, not the price that we pay, which is the marketing price. So what I say companies should provide is they should tell us what's in their product and where they've bought them. They should tell us what the composition is, and they should tell us how they ensure that it meets the regulations. How do they analyse their products? How often do they do it? What methods do they use? Do they outsource that? How do they protect from infection? How do they minimise aluminium content? They should tell us about the safe use and the risks of use, and they should tell us about any scientific studies that they are using to support their claims and allow us full access to those papers if they are using them. They're not experts in anything else. We don't want them to tell us about breastfeeding. We don't want them to tell us about expressing. We don't want them to tell us about anything. And we should absolutely make that clear. What's really ironic is that we can't get this information. Every year, I write to all the companies and ask the same set of questions, and they answer every year, you don't have to worry, our products are very safe. We analyse them regularly, but we don't allow anyone to see that information. That is outrageous. So here we have a product for the most vulnerable children, people in our society, and we're not allowed to know what's in it, and nobody wants to question or challenge it. I find that pretty shocking. One of the other things we do to help support the code is we do this regularly updated little booklet that just talks about some of the websites and organisations, because the formula companies hide behind lots of organisations. So Danone alone has a whole range of different ones, from the Infant and Toddler Forum to the Feeding for Life Foundation to Early Years Life Nutrition to all sorts of things. And it's very difficult sometimes for people to know that they have broken the code. So for those of you who work in UNICEF-accredited organisations, it's useful just to have a quick check sometimes to see what that source of information is. Just out, I say this week, it actually only went on the website today, because we're a very tiny organisation, so we work on a bit of a wing and a prayer. We've just produced the first version of this report, which looks at specialised infant milks. And what I have found really interesting doing this is that if you think things are bad in the world of mainstream infant formula, nobody has been challenging around specialised formula. Now, specialised formula can either be something that's prescribable for a baby that needs something, or it can be a milk that the companies have just decided is a specialised milk. They can decide. If it's a specialised milk, it has a different set of rules, and at the moment they have no code compliance written into them at all. I don't think it's okay the companies choose what milk it is, and we have long conversations, as you might imagine, with the regulators about it. But what I have found doing this report is that many health professionals still feel that around specialised products, that somehow the companies have got the right information, that they're giving them this gift of this information, and that they're really grateful to receive it. And this is a really big problem amongst dietitians in particular, I have discovered, who are quite outraged at the suggestion that they shouldn't be using this as their main source of information. I think we should be outraged at a lot of things. Nobody independently analyses infant milk composition in the UK. The Food Standards Agency should be doing that every single year. They don't. The manufacturers won't give us any data on their products and the composition. We should be really outraged by that. The regulators, when we go and challenge them, so we have regulators at the Department of Health who act as our competent authority, when we ask them if they will ask the companies, they say they don't want to bother them and they don't want to stifle creativity and innovation. I asked an FOI question just before the election at how many meetings the regulators have with industry. They have a monthly meeting at least with the industry to help them and support them in getting their products through to notification. We have to fight to get one meeting every 3 years to talk about the challenges around working with the code. So it's a pretty unfair playing field. And I'm going to demonstrate that with what I'd like to call the curious case of Nutramigen LGG. Now, interestingly, Krista Jo showed some pictures of Enfamil. We don't have that as a mainstream formula here. So this is a specialised formula for babies with cow's milk protein allergy. So it's an extensively hydrolyzed milk. The protein's been broken down. In January, February of this year, people started being told by Mead Johnson, the company that produced this, that they were going to have a product they'd already used called Lipid replaced with this new one. There wasn't any choice about it. And the main difference between the two is that this one contains a probiotic. That's a live bacteria strain. So if you're in the UK, it looks like that. The same milk is marketed all over the world, but depending on where they are, they'll make a different set of claims for it. So if you're in America, it might be relieving colic. If you're in the Netherlands, it's reducing eczema or lactose intolerance or for digestive health. And they change their claims depending on what the market will often let them get away with or what they feel is the main issue being debated in that country. So Mead Johnson. It's not a big company you might have heard about here. They don't have anything 80% of our market is Danone here in the UK, as you probably know, Aptamil and Cow & Gate, and SMA have about 18%, so it's a very tiny market for mainstream formulas. If you look at Mead Johnson globally, however, they are a major code violator. And if you don't know about the report called Breaking the Rules that's done by IBFAN, you can look that up on the internet, and it'll go through all of the companies and all the things that they do globally. This is the kind of nonsense that you have to put up with in the global environment from Mead Johnson. I was in Asia last year, absolutely horrified to see what they were doing in terms of persuading vulnerable parents that their child would go to university only if they had this particular type of milk. It's really powerful, appalling advertising that you see all across many parts of the emerging economies and developing economies that would not be allowed here, but certainly that company should be held to account, I believe, for what it does globally, not just what it does here in the UK. This is also the very same Mead Johnson, which is the most sued of all the formula companies. They are currently still going through the courts because a baby died of meningitis and several others were taken ill because of contamination of the powdered formula with Chronobacter sakazaki, which, as we all know, is a rare thing that you'll find in formula powder, but will usually kill babies if they get it, which is why we have such strict rules about making up our powdered infant formula. They have paid out millions of dollars to other companies because of unfair claims. They have recently, this summer, had to pay $12 million because, has anyone seen the film Tigers that's out and about? So they've just been sued because they were doing exactly the same thing that Nestlé was doing in Pakistan, in China, with Mead Johnson reps, and they've been sued for that. What is really sad is that the family taking the company to court over the death have been going through the courts for years and years, and it keeps getting thrown out on a technicality. They seem to take that much less seriously than they do competitive trade stuff. So you would think, wouldn't you, as a company, you might be a bit sensitive to the making up formula safely thing. We'll come back to that. So if you are a health professional and you get any of the magazines that are around, so this might be the Journal of Health Visiting, Community Practitioner, Journal of Family Healthcare, that take advertising, this is the sort of thing you might see. There's been a series of adverts all year telling you it's coming soon. This is the one telling you it's arrived. What's really interesting is they're not saying this is going to treat your cow's milk allergy. This is the express route to the end of cow's milk allergy. That's a pretty big claim, I would suggest. And as you can see, and this is very typical of the health professional marketing that you get here, you are allowed, in our regulations, to market to health professionals if it's scientific and factual information. That's an advert. At least a third of that is an advert. That's not scientific and factual, and most of them aren't. As you'll see, underneath that, you get little bits of more information, and then I do think you have to have the eyesight of a very, very clever person to usually be able to read most of the other information that comes. So I'll go on to the things that they also say in the ad in a minute. And this is the big thing they're pushing at the moment, that Nutramigen is the only infant formula with evidence of oral tolerance to cow's milk. So if you put a baby on this, they're going to get better quicker, is what they're telling you. And this is the kind of emotive advertising that they've been putting in. This poor child has been denied ice cream, but any minute now, with the help of Nutramigen, he'll be straight in there with the raspberry ripple. So this is, I've blown it up big so you can see it. And I've blown it up big for a reason, because just as Christy Jo said, we have a bit of a footnote issue with all of our marketing. So on that advert, halfway down, the first thing it said, first stop, because they're on their train analogy, first stop is symptom resolution. So it says, proven to have an average efficacy of 99%. And you'll see there's a little footnote there. Faster resolution to symptoms. So when you look at the footnote, just as Christy Jo said, it says, yeah, but not this milk. That actually refers to another milk. But don't worry, because nobody's going to have read that because I have to get a magnifying glass out. The other reference they give is a reference which is a review article, and all it says is that if a child has cow's milk protein allergy, if they're not breastfed, which is the first line of defence, then you have to have an extensively cow's milk. If mum avoids cow's milk, obviously, if she's doing that, then you have a extensively hydrolyzed product. That reference does not say this product is any better. It just says that that's what a child would need. So they take references that are very general and interpret them as being specific to them. They also say that it's faster resolution of symptoms, and they give 2 references. Now, the one thing I tell all my students, and every academic will, is that just because something's published doesn't necessarily mean that it's true in all circumstances, and just because something is significant doesn't make it meaningful. And the reason we have committees who sit around and look at huge bodies of evidence to come up with good decisions is because one study tells you nothing. So most of the formula companies will cherry-pick odd studies which will show something positive, but which actually often are hugely, deeply flawed in terms of the kind of studies that you would have to have. And in fact, our Department of Health regulations in long time ago said that you should never look at any data that did not have a breast milk fed reference group in all circumstances, and that never happens. So the 2 references they give, one is actually a study of children with eczema, not cow's milk protein allergy, and the other one was a really tiny study of some children with blood in stools. Neither of those would be evidence in any court of law to suggest a faster resolution of cow's milk allergy symptoms. They're just 2 very small references that they've decided to throw in. So the next thing they're telling you, because you're on your train journey, so your final destination is going to be you're going to leave your cow's milk protein allergy behind. So they're claiming they're the only extensively hydrolyzed formula proven to accelerate time to tolerance, and just as Whiskers told us so many times that 8 out of 10 cats preferred it, because that was one of the top marketing slogans, we're having 8 out of 10 infants are tolerant to cow's milk after 12 months of use. Now, of course, many of you will know that cow's milk protein allergy resolves itself in at least half of children after the first year of life. So the first thing any scientist would be thinking is, well, when did they pick the children up and when did they leave? And did they really have good groups that would be able to manage that? The actual reference and, blow me down, the footnote for those 2 claims is the same. So the footnote says, when they say they're the only extensively hydrolyzed formula clinically proven to accelerate time to tolerance, that was compared to some children being fed formula that we don't recommend for children with cow's milk protein allergy, such as rice hydrolate, soya, and other formulas. Amino acid formula is what you would give a baby with a very severe allergy or a multiple food allergy. So there'll be a different group of children. So basically, that's not a true claim. That study is a different type of study. And the main reference that they're using for these huge claims that they are going to cure babies of cow's milk protein allergy is one study by an Italian called Canani, where they took some babies that came in at an average age of about 6 months. All these babies had been diagnosed and were doing well on the formula they'd been given. So they carried them on the formulas they were being given. So obviously some of them would have been more seriously allergic to start with if they were already on an amino acid formula. So that's not any kind of random trial. This is a continuation trial. They also said that some of the babies were being breastfed, but they only just said some of them had been breastfed for 2 months or more, but with no explanation whatsoever. And in all of the groups but 2, they were on multiple types of formula. So in terms of evidence and noise in a study, we're talking everything here. You know, it's not random. It's an aging group of baby. The groups weren't very big. There were multiple, all sorts of things. And the authors concluded that actually the main link was whether or not the allergy was IgE mediated. As you know, allergy can either be IgE or non-IgE mediated, and that was actually the most likely reason why they would recover. But they actually said that, you know, one of the extensively hydrolyzed formula groups did a bit better. There's no way in a million years any committee on the planet would accept that as evidence for those claims. But if they make a claim for which there is no evidence in the science, in the literature to you as health professionals, there's nothing we can do about it. There is no mechanism to complain. So my argument is just don't read them, mostly. So then you think, well, I'll go and have a look and see what they say on the website. So they've got this new formula, which they're heavily promoting. It tells you on the website that there's some nutritional information. The only information that they've got is that it supports healthy growth, with a reference to a study that says that any formula that you use is better than starving them, frankly, isn't it? And then one of their favourite phrases is tailored for the needs of infants. which has no meaning and no reference. Well, of course it is. It has to follow regulations and a couple of other things. So about 3 months ago, we started asking them for the data card. No, haven't got one. We asked again, They sent us one. It was the old formula. We asked again. They sent us a scan. We couldn't read it. So in the end, we wrote a table of our own composition and sent it back to them. And they said, we don't really know if this formula is the same composition as Lipil or not. We think it might be, but someone's told us the vitamin K might be different. So they're one of the fourth biggest companies selling formula in the world, can't actually get it together. And anyone who's read my statement on Pro Futura being introduced to the NHS this year will see that we had to wait 8 weeks for Danone, one of the 10 biggest food companies in the world, to have time to write a data card. It's outrageous. We should not allow them to get away with that. The other big thing, of course, they're changing and saying everywhere is this is a milk you have to make up with cold water, because if you make it up with water at 70 degrees, it's going to kill the probiotics. I would want to know there was very strong evidence that probiotic is needed to take the risk of giving a baby non-sterile formula, a vulnerable baby non-sterile formula, a company that's being sued because a baby has died, and many babies have died. So we have this big issue here for me about risk and benefit. So we know what the risk is. It's global, and we have accepted it here in our regulations around infant formula, but not for specialist formula. So Mead Johnson, in order to be able to market this product in the UK, has to go to the Department of Health as the competent authority and say, can we market this milk in the UK? So what do you think the Department of Health did? They very kindly, for Mead Johnson, set up a secret review group by the Food Standards Agency. They put together an ad hoc working group for the Committee on Toxicology to look at the company evidence. And I only discovered this completely by accident when I was reading the minutes of a COP panel for something completely different. And I thought, that's interesting, a restricted review. My ears prick up. And then blow me down in the last few weeks, Mead Johnson have been sending a letter out to health professionals saying they were given the findings of this restricted review in May of 2015, which was actually a month before the COP meeting even met to discuss it, directly from the regulator by email. I have been writing to them, as you might imagine. They love me to death, saying, so can I see it then? If the company are allowed to use this information for marketing, can't I see it? Can't I see the evidence they've put in? But apparently they haven't had time to get back to me yet at COT, and the regulators have said, it's nothing to do with us, it's a Food Standards Agency issue. I think that is utterly outrageous. Basically, that means our government departments are working for the industry. I think we should be complaining. So this is what Mead Johnson is telling you, so a letter may be dropping through your doorway if you haven't already had one. They're saying that they dutifully notified the UK Department of Health, and they've had an independent assessment, apparently they have been told by our government that this product is safe and has efficacy, which means it works and can be used, which I think is pretty major considering the claims they're making and the safety assessment. They also say in that letter, and I have a feeling the regulators, now they know I have my hands on the letter and know what's been done, are quaking, because Mead Johnson are telling people that powdered infant formula is safe when prepared according to the labels. That is not true. Fundamentally not true. And I would really like to understand how that information has been allowed to happen, whether that's a misinterpretation by Mead Johnson from what Department of Health said, or whether actually that was something they were being allowed to say. But that goes against all our current regulations. Interestingly, in Norway, they've done a review, and what have they said? We do not have any evidence that suggests there are beneficial effects or safety of LGG in infant formula. They actually really go on to say as well, which I think is a very interesting point, that they're quite worried about the idea of a monoculture of bacteria being given to babies and what impact that might have on the intestinal flora, because we just don't know. So they're taking a precautionary principle approach in Norway, which is absolutely what we should be taking here. EFSA is our European Food Safety Authority. So they are the people we look to within Europe to make good decisions about what you're allowed to put in food, the regulations, and the health claims that you can make about products. We had a really excellent, full and comprehensive review at the end of last year on their opinion on the essential composition of infant formula and follow-on formula. So that was the review that said categorically, nucleotides, nah, don't need them. Prebiotics, nah, don't need them. Probiotics, no, don't need them. And all these other things they're making claims about. If you haven't read those sections of the infant milk report, it's sobering reading that all these claims are still being made that have been said categorically that they don't need. And what they say is there is no evidence that probiotics are of any benefit and they are not necessary additions. So I would love to know how an ad hoc working group at the Food Standards Agency had enough time and expertise to actually say something more than EFSA, which is a huge multidisciplinary European-wide group, in favour of Mead Johnson's product. So I have been checking my emails today thinking, maybe they'll have told me today what this evidence is, magic evidence is the company has come up with. I don't think they will, and I think we will struggle to get hold of that dossier because they'll tell it's restricted. So I think we should be more outraged. And the reason I'm telling you this story in detail, is because this is a little microcosm of everything that we're dealing with every day, every time I'm trying to find out about products, trying to find out what's in them. The infant milk industry is very powerful and very wealthy, and we don't hold them to account. And I think we should really seriously be challenging them much more. So, for example, Abbott, which was another one of the 4 biggest in the world, tell health professionals on the health that they have a library of evidence to support all of their claims on specialised formula. Do you know what's in that library? 1 paper about SIP feeds and older people. 1 paper. Has any health professional ever written to them and said, that's not a library, that's just a piece of paper? They have got away with it because nobody's been challenging it. And I actually have to say I feel a little bit of a failure because I've been doing and talking about formula for, 5 or 6 years now, and I don't think we're really winning. So I've decided that in January we're going to have a bit of a campaign. I haven't quite decided what or how yet, but I think we could do a much better job. The one thing I learnt many years ago, a friend of mine went to be the food czar for Scotland, Gillian Kynock, when Labour first came in after devolution. And she was there to start off the food revolution in Scotland. And the one thing she always told me that stuck is she said, never underestimate how much big companies hate being challenged by small organisations and consumers. It goes right to the top. They don't want to be criticised. They don't want to feel like the bad guys. Because they genuinely do think they're the good guys. You have to bear that in mind. So anyone who wants to volunteer, email me, and I'm going to think of some way that we will work together to send out a lot more letters and a lot more challenges in what we do. So that's going to be my little January campaign. And I'm very much hoping I might get a bit of a celebrity to help me out, but we'll watch this space. So this is just to say some of the other things we do as a charity. We do practical guides, and all of these are open access, and if you haven't seen them, these are all done very technically. They look like pictures of food, but it's a bit more techy than that, and they've all been done to really help me when I try and influence policymakers around some of the recommendations that they're giving. So if anyone wants to contact me, my details are there, and if you've got any questions, I can do my best to answer them.